Hey, Michael with XForcePC. I'm revisiting the 210 degree situation that we've been presenting. And the way we have our current system set up is we use one really fast computer and we do 3 individual views of X-Plane. So this is not one view that's been smeared across 3 screens. These are 3 separate windows that will be drawn individually. And what that allows you to do is get a full wraparound. So I have these TVs, they're 50-inch 1080p TVs, almost at 90-degree angles. Now I know this probably doesn't look like a 50-inch TV. That's because it's 3 feet behind me. It is 50 inches, all 3 of these. And so when I sit up in here and I'm flying, as far as I can turn my head this way and as far as I can turn my head that way, I see nothing but scenery. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. So as I said, we've done this in the past with one really fast computer, but a customer asked me, well, what if you did it with 3 computers? Would that be better? Would that be faster? I thought, that's a pretty good question. I don't know, let's find out. So what I've done here is I've built 3 computers, and I'm going to talk in terms of dollars and cents because that's kind of really what it boils down to, is how much does this stuff cost. So with the one computer, the one really fast one, that's $2,300. And that's pretty much as fast as we can build it. X-Plane, at least at this time, is totally CPU bound, meaning it will go as fast as the processor can take it. The video card's important, but the limiting factor in most cases is the CPU. So what I've done here again is I've got 3 separate computers, one for each screen, and they're on the same network, and they're talking to each other on the network. This is the master machine, and then these I guess you would call slave machines, and they're just drawing whatever the middle one tells it to. Now, I can tell you as far as frame rate goes, I don't have a frame rate test per se, but in this particular scene in New York City, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a ton of buildings out there, and we are getting 42 frames per second on all 3, just about. I'd say the average is about 42. And the rendering options we're using are here. I would call this high because the big thing that makes the biggest difference is the number of objects. Number of world objects makes a huge difference. And we've got that set to high. When we're running it on one computer, we have to turn that down to medium, otherwise our frame rate just isn't acceptable. The rest of the settings we pretty much leave the same. The reflection detail, you notice that's turned all the way down. I've found that turning that up gives a very small visual improvement but has a very large frame rate hit. So most people I think are running their reflection level down at the lowest setting. Now a couple of caveats while we're looking at this. If you're running it on one computer and you move with your hat switch like this, it actually moves all 3 displays in concert. But notice the side displays here. I know they're at an extreme angle and they're hard to see, but they are not changing. Only the middle is changing when I do this. But when you run it on a single display, I need to turn on VSync. When you run it on a single display, actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that because I can't see the frame rate. They all move, when you run it on, a single computer, they all move in concert. But here, as you see, it only moves the active, middle window. And then to get yourself centered again, you just hit the W key. So that's a little bit of a caveat. It's not that big of a deal because when you look to the left, you can pretty much see everything you need to see, and you look to the right, you can see everything you need to see. The only one you really need to look down on is this middle one. And what you can do is maybe program one of your buttons to be like this W key that snaps you back to perfect again. So I can already tell you our frame rate is better here. We do have the difference with the view, meaning it only moves the one here in the middle. And then the other difference is there's slight micro stuttering on the side displays because they're talking over the network. When you bank the wings like this, there's little micro stutters, and I think that has to do with the network communication. And these are micro stutters that you do not see when you're running it all on one computer. So we're getting better frame rate, but we're getting little micro stutters on the side displays. Nothing that personally I find unacceptable. Some people might find it unacceptable. It just depends on how sensitive you are to that type of thing. But we're still in the upper 30s. We're floating between 35 and 40 frames per second, and just look at the amount of, scenery we've got out there. And of course we're showing that on all three. So that is what I would call high settings on three separate computers. Now we'll look and see what it does on medium. Hey, Michael, XForcePC. So I've changed the settings to medium, and just flying around New York, and this is kind of a non-scientific test, but in general, we were getting between 35 and 40 frames per second on high. So now on medium, we're getting between 40 and 45. So we improved by right around 10 frames per second. Again, 35 to 40 is what we got on high, 35 to 40, and now we're getting 40 to 45, in some cases pushing up to 50 with everything set to medium. And this is again running three separate computers, one computer driving each display. And I'm still seeing a little bit of some micro stuttering on the side screens. If I bank the rings really hard, they kind of, just little stutters, and that has to do with, I think, the network communication. I've got it set up for 60 transmissions per second, and I would think that would be plenty, but we do see little micro stutters, and of course we've still got that issue where it only moves, the hat switch only moves the center display. So I'm going to hook back up the single computer and we'll see how it compares. Hey, so now I've got the single fast computer hooked up. So remember, I had three $1,200 computers hooked up, and on high we were getting between 35 and 40 frames per second. This is over New York, and I should mention this is just regular X-Plane, no SkyMax or HD mesh or any of that stuff. This is just regular old X-Plane. So with a single computer on high, we're getting between 25 and 30 frames per second. So not as fast as the three individuals. So again, 25 to 30 on the one real beefy computer, and then we're getting 35 to 40 on three separate computers. Now, we remove some caveats though. You remember on the other one, if I panned up and down, the side screens didn't move. Well, when you're running one computer, they all move in concert. And I don't have VSync turned on. You're probably seeing some screen tearing. And I don't have that turned on because I want to see the actual frame rate. But if you actually, that's what VSync does. If you don't know, it'll get rid of that screen tearing. So if I turn VSync on, in theory, yeah, you don't see that screen tearing anymore. But anyway, you see how it all pans together. The other thing is we had some micro stutters on the side displays, and I think that's pretty much gone. Yeah. So it looks like the micro stutters are kind of gone on this two side displays since we're not communicating through the network. So we've lowered our frame rate a bit, but we've eliminated some of the micro stuttering on the side displays, and we get this ability to pan all three screens simultaneously. So now I'm going to switch the settings over to medium, which is where we recommend customers running this on one machine put their settings, at least as of X-Plane 10 or 11, beta, public beta 7. Now this could all change, they could make frame rate improvements and that could change, but this is public beta 7. Okay, so we're back now. We're doing the same flight, just kind of circling New York, and as I mentioned, on high, frame rates were around 25 to 30 on high. Now we're on medium objects. And again, that's the only setting I changed, is the number of objects, because that seems to have the biggest effect on frame rate. And now we're hovering around 35 frames per second most of the time. 30 to 35 is what I would say. And on the 3 separate computers, one driving each screen, we were between 40 and 45. And again, we're between 30 and 35 with a single computer on medium objects. And I'll just go ahead and bring up my settings here again. You see we've moved the world objects to medium, and that's the only thing that I've changed. So, to recap that one more time, on a single $2,300 computer, this is a 4.6 gigahertz i7 7700K with a GTX 1070 graphics card. We're getting anywhere from 25 to 35 frames per second depending on our number of objects. Whereas we run 3 $1,200 computers, we have about 10 more frames per second than that, so we're running 35 to 45 instead of 25 to 35. But we do have the caveat of there's a little bit of micro stuttering on the side displays, and then the scrolling doesn't scroll around all 3 displays. It only affects the one display. So, I prefer the single computer, even though you do have to take a little bit of a frame rate hit. Hopefully with the optimizations that should be coming, that 25 frames per second to 35 frames per second that we're seeing, which is kind of marginal, kind of right on the cusp of being too low, will increase, and we'll be able to get more into the 30s, high 30s and 40s, which is where I kind of like to be on frames per second. But to answer the question, there are 3 less expensive computers, faster than one really beefy one, doing 3 individual displays. The answer is technically yes in frames per second, but with the caveats mentioned earlier. Hopefully that helps you out.